Hey everyone, we're going to be talking about the historical thinking and reasoning skills, what they are, and how we'll be using them in this class. So first of all, what are historical thinking skills? They're describing what students should be able to do while they're learning the content. And this can be applied during asynchronous learning, during synchronous learning. They're skills that you can use across multiple disciplines. So it's not just used in history, even though they're historical thinking skills, but you can use them in any humanities course. You can use them in your everyday life. First and foremost, identify and explain. This is going to be a really common phrase that you're going to hear. You identify a historical concept, a development, or a process, and then you explain it. So you give evidence. And this is actually the most common type of question you're going to see in what's called a short answer question, otherwise called an SAQ. Identify and explain. The second skill is sourcing and situation. This is asking you to analyze sourcing and situations of primary and secondary sources. And a couple of different ways you can do this. We go back to the first skill. You identify a source's point of view, a purpose, a historical situation, or an audience. And then you explain it as well as the significance of it. So you have to identify it, you explain it, and then you talk about why it's important, why should we care. Skill 3, claims and evidence in sources. So our focus here is to analyze the arguments in primary and secondary sources. So first, identify and describe a claim or argument in a text-based or non-text-based source. And that can be a map, an artistic portrayal of a painting. It can be an artifact. It can be architecture. The Palace of Versailles that the Sun King Louis XIV built. That would be a great example of how you could use this skill when you're looking at architecture. So you identify the evidence that is used in a source to support your argument, and then you can compare the argument or main ideas of two sources. You explain then how the claims or evidence support, modify, or refute a source's argument. And this will be stuff that we do in what's called a document-based question, where you'll be given 7 documents and you'll have to analyze them and group them to support an argument. Contextualization, providing the background. So if you've ever watched Star Wars, A New Hope, it's one of the best ones by far. It's actually the original movie. You should watch that. If you skip past the scrolling font and then you dive into the movie and you see this little ship being chased by a big one, you're going to be completely lost. So instead, you go back, you read the yellow font. It's going to tell you everything that had to happen up to that moment. It's the background information. If you've ever read Harry Potter, every beginning of the Harry Potter stories starts out with 11 years ago, 12 years ago, a dark wizard by the name of Voldemort. It was Halloween, and so on and so forth. Contextualization will ask you to identify or describe a historical context for specific historical developments or processes. And you'll have to explain how a specific historical development is situated within the broader context. Making connections, that is what we do every day in this class. We answer the why, and we use all of our reasoning skills, comparison, causation, continuity, and change to analyze patterns and connections. So when we learn our content, this is how we're learning it. We're learning it through that broader lens of connections. So we identify patterns and then we explain them. Everything we do in this class is making connections by identifying and explaining. I told you we're going to keep coming back to that. Identify and explain. There it is again. Argumentation goes hand in hand with making those connections. So you make a historically defensible claim. Technically, it's cause and effect, it's comparison, or change in continuity. You support the argument using specific historical evidence. You explain the relationship between the pieces of evidence. And then, to expand on your argument, you corroborate, or you modify using different evidences to strengthen your argument. The reasoning processes are how you can use different historical thinking skills in different ways. Comparison. So describe similarities or differences. You explain why they're relevant and how they're relevant. Causation describes cause and or effects. Once again, you explain the relationship between causes and effects. Take it to the next level by explaining the difference between primary and secondary causes, and then short and long-term effects. And then you explain why that matters. Why should we care? What was the impact? And finally, change in continuity over time. So in this, you describe the patterns of change or continuity in a given period of time. You explain patterns, and then you explain the significance and the changes or the continuities of these patterns, not just at that moment, but in a larger significance. If you have any questions about these historical thinking skills, please reach out to us. We're happy to help. Have a great day, guys.